Visiting scholar with reasons to believe and a professor emeritus of political science and director of national security studies at California State University, San Bernardino, where he's been since 1990. He helped establish an intelligence community center of academic excellence there, along with 2 degree programs that were the first of their kind in the country, dealing with national cybersecurity and national security studies. He participated as an analyst with George Mason University in developing an evidence-based reasoning system called Cogent to improve critical and analytical skills in thinking for intelligence analysis. He is a Marine. He serves in his local church at Sierra Vista Community Church in Upland, California. He's published on issues of national security, nuclear weapons, arms control, intelligence, and the Christian perspective on just war doctrine. And he co-authored a book with Hugh Ross and Ken Samples titled Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, a rational Christian look at UFOs and extraterrestrials. So that is Dr. Mark Clark, who's visiting with us today, and hopefully our technology will work to transition over to him at this point.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I just saw a chat box that said someone lives in San Bernardino when we're in staff with crew. We were there and the fire came through. Wow. Fortunately for me, maybe not for everyone else, we're still in Durango. We have 1 more week to go here. My wife and I split time between California and San Bernardino, and we just, we'll be heading home in a week. Hopefully we'll miss the fire season, but I'm not entirely certain. By the way, Hugh and Kathy give their regards to everyone. They are very good friends of ours. In fact, Hugh married us in 1993. We just celebrated our 28th anniversary, and Kathy was Mara's, my wife's, matron of honor. Just FYI, I have a buzzer here in case my dog goes a little crazy, because as we all know, in the age of Zoom and pandemics, a lot of us will work from home, and I teach from home many times. Today's topic is, and I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope everything works well here. UFOs, and now what we're calling, thank you, let me know, unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. And that's kind of the new term of art that's being used for this. I'm going to give you a little bit of back. I'm going to give you some of what we call in the intelligence community my bottom line up front, but then I'll kind of walk through not only some of the recent phenomena, but also kind of what we wrote about in the book, so that you have a better kind of context for all that's going on. And I think then we'll open it up to questions, because I think there's going to be a lot of questions, I hope, from you all. 60 Minutes actually did a story on this just last May 16th, because of this impending release of the report. And it has been 50 years, over 50 years, since the last report was released by the US government, and that was the US Air Force's Project Blue Book, that went from a period from about 1953 to 1969, and it covered over 12,000, well over 12,000 reported incidences of UFO phenomena. This new report just came out. It's called the Preliminary Assessment on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. And it was by the Director of National Intelligence Office, but there's an actual subgroup that was formed at the behest of Senator Marco Rubio that I'll talk about a little bit later, but it was called the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. And the government, if you don't have an official name or logo or button or coin, you don't have, or an acronym especially. So if you don't have an acronym, you don't exist. So it had to come under the auspices of this group. The report was released late June of this year. Again, the UAP is the modern term that's being used by the military for UFO because of the stigma attached to people having reported on UFO in the past. This is available. It's an unclassified report. I forget how long. It's not very long. It's maybe 14 pages. That was given to Congress, but there was a classified annex, they would call it, given to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, as well as the House Permanent Committee on Intelligence. HIPSI and SISI, the nicknames for those committees. Those classified portions probably do not have a whole lot more in them, but they may have some things that are very specific to their methodology that is not reported in the unclassified one. And this report, I think, and I predicted it would, and it has, disappoint the two groups that most wanted it. Those who believe that the UAP phenomena was a national security threat, either from Russia or from China or from someone, or those who wanted, we've got final proof of alien life, right? There's two kinds of people that were pushing for this. The DNI, that's the short term I'm going to use for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, seemed to rule out alien visitation entirely, and not so much in the report because it doesn't even touch on it, but by everyone that was involved or interviewed off the record. Basically, they just said it's not even within the realm of what they consider because it's too bizarre for their reporting instrumentation, and I'll talk more about that. But they also did not believe it was a national. They found no evidence it was a national security threat from either Russia or China, and they mentioned them. And that covers a period of 144 reported UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, from the period of 2004 through 2021. Only one item was confirmed. Only one thing happened to be confirmed, and it was a verified deflating balloon that occurred in a training area of military experience. So where did this begin? How did it start? You may have to move and adjust your side screen. You can minimize that on the right. This is the letter that started something that came out in 2017, a report by both the New York Times and Politico. Politico is a national magazine that's published on the internet, reported on something called the Advanced Aerospace or Aviation Threat Identification Program, ATIP. It was an earmark of $22 million sponsored by Senator Harry Reid, who was the majority leader in the Senate at the time, Democrat, from Nevada. It included this period of time of 5 years of, like I said, 6 or 7 different research projects on things like warp speed, leading or hypersonic propulsion, possibility of wormhole travel, theoretical physics, along with whatever UAPs may exist, because they were getting reports of military folks having some kind of experiences they could not explain. Senator Reid was, and this is where I get a little suspicious. One, it was an earmark. Earmarks are, boondoggles. They're ways in which it's called pork. That's the non-technical term, but widely accepted term for what members of Congress will do is they want money to go into their area, to their cities, their region, their representative. And this was one of those. One of Harry Reid's biggest supporters, a fellow by the name of Bob Bigelow. Bob Bigelow, you may have heard of, was in charge of, he led the enterprise budget suites. He's also done some programs, research on capsules for living conditions in space. He also not only encouraged the senator to do this because he believes in alien life visiting the planet, but he also received money from this program. It ended in 2012. Some people have come out. One in particular, Luis Elizondo, supposedly was in charge of it for some period of time, although it's kind of hard tracking down whether he was or wasn't. But he's one of the outspoken people that came out and said the government's hiding something, they're not doing everything they do. And this is what happened back in Project Blue Book. He, along with a fellow by the name of Senator Chris Mellon, who was an Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and a Senate Select Committee intelligence staffer, joined with a fellow by the name of Tom DeLong to make a series on this through what they call To the Stars Academy. And this was broadcast on History Channel several years ago. Stephen Aftergood, Federation of American Scientists, he's the director of their project on government secrecy, basically said the contractors are the only ones that made out on this whole research project. The US and the government did not. Notably, however, a lot of the attention that's been paid to and why this report came about is from two primary events. The first one was in 2004. The USS Nimitz sent pilots near San Clemente Island who spotted these bizarre tic-tac shaped objects that made impossible maneuvers. Instead of moving in one direction, they would make sharp right angle turns. They would rotate around. They had no obvious means of propulsion. They would stop suddenly, disappear, reappear. And some of them you can see on the right side, these are apparently 6 or 7 of them look like they were attacking a naval convoy, like in a very threatening posture before they disappeared. The second, and probably by far the most famous report, is a series of incidences over 18 months between 2014 and 2015. The USS Teddy Roosevelt was on the East Coast, moving down between Norfolk, Virginia, and Florida, and pilots repeatedly saw similar types of phenomena over a period of 18 months, in particular 2, who were featured on the 60 Minutes show back in May. They include the phenomena they saw. This is a caption. You can actually go online and see the video of this. Just type in UAP videos or Pentagon videos or Navy ones, and you'll find these. This is not a video to take up too much space on this broadcast that we're doing. But they reported seeing this phenomena, multiple pilots seeing it, which is kind of rare, but also 2 separate instruments, radar and infrared, on the FA-18s. This is right after they got a special software upgrade to their instrumentation in which they were able to see this. They reported seeing these things dropping from 80,000 feet down to 20,000 feet in less than a second, which starts to defy the laws of physics, same as the bizarre tic-tac shape stuff that happened before. Sharp right angle turns, as flying at speeds of as upwards of 1,300 miles per hour. They would get close to the aircraft. In fact, they would interrupt some of aircraft operations, the training operations, so that the pilots would have to cancel their training and go back to base because of this. They would get close, then disappear, and then reappear on radar 60 miles or more away. One report, Luis Elizondo, who I mentioned before, revealed that he said, I didn't see this in the DNI report, maybe this is part of the classified annex, but he reported saying that some of these objects were pulling something to the equivalent of 600 to 700 Gs, 600 to 700 times the force of gravity. Now, if you know anything from military experience, pilots regularly have to wear pressurized suits to keep the blood flowing from going straight to their brain and knocking them out, or from dropping out and knocking them out. So they wear pressurized suits to keep the blood distributed evenly and oxygen and all that. They can pull at best 9 Gs for very short periods of time without blacking out. So anything pulling over 9 Gs is almost physically impossible for any type of physical life form we know. In fact, they call a pilot that can actually survive a 9G turn and not black out is called a super G-man. Now, it may be super G-woman because we have female pilots too. In fact, of the 2 pilots that were interviewed on 60 Minutes, one was male and one was female. Well, because of these incidences, Senator Marco Rubio tasked the UAP task force to keep track and wanted it in the Office of Naval Intelligence because by and large, the vast majority of the sightings have been by US Navy pilots, not by anyone else. The Navy, in fact, introduced in 2017 new guidelines for reporting and alleviating the stigma. And the reason for it was, obviously, if you were reporting UFO phenomena, you were considered a kook or a crank, and they wanted to somehow provide a more uniform process by which Navy pilots would feel okay about reporting it and not get the stigma attached to them. This also then led the hype behind this because it started going public, both with Luis Elizondo, Chris Mellon, to the Stars Academy show product, then the pilots going public with it led to kind of some bizarre stuff that I looked at. I don't know if you remember, but just about 2 years ago, there was this big, huge push to storm Area 51. It started with a fellow by the name of Matty Roberts, who was just this young kid posting on Facebook, said, hey, if we storm Area 51, we all meet there, and if we Naruto run, they can't shoot us, they can't get us. What is Naruto run? I had never heard of it before then, but I had to comment on it. Naruto is Japanese anime character that runs with his arms flat back and seems to run faster than human beings. And of course, it's a little bizarre because it's actually the worst way to run if you're going to. What's fascinating is he got well over 2 million likes and well over 100,000+ that said that they would attend this event in September of 2019. Fortunately, the FBI and the US military discouraged their behavior, and only a few hundred showed up, and no one tried penetrating the Area 51. Now, if you don't know what Area 51 is one of our super secret test facilities. It's actually not that secret because so many people have been fascinated by it for so long. If you've watched any of the sci-fi movies like Independence Day or the series Stargate, it's highly featured in there, is where we keep all that alien technology. The facts are a little bit simpler than that. I've had current and former students who work out there, and it's just basically advanced aviation research area. So fortunately, they were deterred from doing something really dumb. Matty Roberts apologized on Facebook, said, hey, Mr. FBI, I was just kidding. I just wanted to get some likes. And yeah, he got a lot of attention. So Lights in the Sky, Little Green Men, a book we wrote quite a few years ago. But the vast majority of our findings are with us to this day. And we have seen nothing that changes our kind of assessment back then. Can everyone mute? Because I hear some interruption from going on. Someone's keyboard is clicking. Let me just go over this and then we'll save some time for questions and answers because there's a lot to be discussed. Of the three of us, Hugh's got the most experience. Since he was an amateur astronomer since he was very young, during his amateur astronomy days, before going to university and becoming an official astronomer, he was asked to handle all the reports of UFOs in Canada. Once he actually got on telescopes, because he knew the night sky better than most professional astronomers, he continued to get asked to monitor all these UFO reports. So he's got years of experience both before and after he became a Christian. So a lot of things that he points out here. The biggest problem is that UFOs and UAPs tend to defy the laws of physics. They leave no artifacts. And this is one of the key things. Jimmy Carter, when he was president, said to NASA, I want you to get to the bottom of this. And NASA responded by saying, if you can show me an aircraft or any kind of physical evidence that there is such a thing, we'll be happy to do so. But the bigger problem is they generate no sonic booms. They make impossibly sharp turns and sudden stops. They hover right above the ground with no air movement, okay? They change momentum at phenomenal speeds. They change shape, size, and color. They appear and disappear and reappear in different places. There's a number of things in the early days, and I still think this is true because the DNI report is not very complete. We had observed back in the day for years that you could either get it on radar, but not by human observation, or on camera, but not by humans, or humans saw it, but radar couldn't get it. These incidences we see with the latest Navy stuff, they've captured on more than one instrument and had more than one person see it. So this is new, if it in fact is a UFO that we'll talk about. The other thing that Hugh points out, among other things in his section, is that he's observed that UFOs always seem to be slightly ahead of the general knowledge, scientific knowledge of the public they deal with. For example, in the 19th century, they would appear when they would talk about things, when they would hear or people would understand and have visitation, they said they were from the other side of the moon. Then with the general level of knowledge of people got to a point where we knew that's not possible, then they were from Venus. Well, once people realized, you couldn't live on Venus, then they were from Mars. Now they're intergalactic, right? Because they're beyond the horizon. But this goes back in history, and we could probably cross-culturally see it with other animals, but certainly in our history, just after the Civil War, 1890s, dirigibles were reported in the sky, and someone put out patents on them that couldn't be confirmed until 1904. In World War II, there were reports of Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters are these mysterious jet-like aircraft that flew around and could not be captured, but never actually posed a physical threat. Since 1947, however, it's been primarily flying saucers and the like, or now these new bizarre tic-tac shaped objects. Sections by Ken Samples, he looks at the religious component and the contactee and abductee component of society. He looks at the cultic societies or occultic societies that worship them. And so there's quite a bit of information he has in his section on there that it's useful for us to pay attention to. He points out, though, that the first wave of UFO sightings were, the primary message was, hey, we're benevolent. We're here because you are endangering your lives and the galaxy because of nuclear weapons. Second wave, 20 years later, a generation later, they were hostiles. They were the Greys. They're out to probe and hurt people. The third wave is develop a cult following, the Hale-Bopp cult down in San Diego. If you remember, there was this group that believed the mothership was hiding behind the moon, and all they had to do is kill themselves and be taken up. Now we think, Ken and I both agree, and perhaps you as well, that there's a fourth wave, and they are related to this consistent messaging of military threats. They pose some kind of military threats. Now, one of the things that we discovered is that, and Ken's very good about detailing this, people who are either contactees or abductees have permanent psychological and spiritual harm done to them by virtue of their having been either contacted or abducted. My components focused on Area 51, Project Blue Book, Roswell, where this first alien ship was supposed to be captured. Of course, it was literally it wasn't a weather balloon. It was a balloon that was used to test for nuclear detonations, posing as a weather balloon by the US military. And then I looked at the whole role of government conspiracies and cover-ups and kind of explored conspiracy thinking in there, which leads to some people believing in things that we have no evidence. One of the most fascinating things we found, though, from Project Blue Book, out of well over 12,000 reports, out of all those years, only 701 could not be explained. That's less than 0.5%. The conclusion of the researchers on it was this is not worth the time to investigate, and I think the pattern stays true to this day. It's interesting because there's non-Christians who have looked at this. Jacques Vallée is one, a scientist. He argues that they are real, but non-physical. He will point out that there's 6 different astronomers who are non-Christians who have looked at this over 10 years combined, and they all believe that it's real, but non-physical. And what do I mean by that? So let's go back to Blue Book. Over 95, 98, 99% can be explained as physical phenomena that's either misidentified or wrongly recorded or with faulty instrumentation. So probably upwards, we've always said 95+%, it could be higher than 99.5%. If Project Blue Book stands, then it's going to be less than 0.5%. This leads us to what we call the residual UFO hypothesis. Once you can explain rationally with evidence all the other ones away, less than 0.5% remain, yet that leaves us with millions of potential sightings worldwide over all the years. So we take and we look at what these scientists who are agnostic or non-Christian, say Jacques Vallée and others, and they all agree that there's something real going on, but it has to be non-physical. It defies the laws of physics. We have some credible witnesses to incredible phenomena. The US Air Force, and particularly the Navy pilots, these are credible folks. So they are credible people, but they witness incredible behavior. our take on it as believers in Christ is that this residual phenomena, that if you can't explain it and there's no other explanation, these could be, and we think they are, demonic. That is, they're in the angelic realm. They do not interact with humans in a benevolent way. In fact, if you look back at the contactees and abductees, they suffer permanent psychological and spiritual harm. That these are, this is the demonic realm. If you look at scripture, you find in Ezekiel and other places in Revelation, bizarre looking, and these are benevolent angelic beings who appear to human senses in bizarre fashions. It's easy to imagine that the demonic realm can do the same kind of thing, that they can appear in a bizarre way or appear to you in a way that would appeal to your fascination with the occult. And that's what's fascinating too, is if you look at a lot of the so-called automatic writing is people who believe they've been in contact with alien life from beyond the galaxy, begin to do these automatic writing pieces, and some will produce what they call the Urantia book. Supposedly, Urantia, U-R-A-N-T-I-A, you can find it online. Fascinating piece that supposedly the first two-thirds of which denies physical reality the way we understand it, and the last third denies the deity of Jesus Christ. And you have to ask yourself the question, why is the deity of Christ so important to this alien life unless it's from the demonic realm? What we have discovered, and then Hugh points out, if you also see where the patterns of reporting are the greatest, they are in the areas where there's the greatest occultic participation. In Alaska and Hawaii, generally speaking, they have been the areas of greatest reporting. But I think more recently, we're seeing them, in these military zones, and that's going to bring up some other issues. One of the issues that I think is fascinating to me is out of 144 incidents of reports, the DNI report shows that because the reporting styles were so different, there's no way to really look at this as a complete picture. You can't get a trend analysis or a pattern analysis. So that we have no concrete answer. They were trying to look at it from data analytic perspective. It makes me wonder how much they actually investigated, how detailed they got in interviews, but I just don't know. But one of the things that we point out is that from a Christian apologetic is if we find people who are fascinated with the occult or they have open doors to the occult, these are more often the people who are likely to have seen or experienced or highly believe in UFO phenomena. Now, there's some scary things because consistently in the 20th century and now in the 21st, 50% of Americans and Canadians either believe in or know someone who believes in the UFO phenomena. A recent Pew study, and this is within the last 3 months, found that 65% of the US population believe intelligent life exists on other planets. Younger people are far more likely to believe it than older people. Younger people, the millennial generation, at 75%, and people under 50, about 50, or I'm sorry, over 50, about 57%. American Worldview Inventory indicates, however, and I think this ties together, millennials are now far more likely to consult their horoscope than their Bibles. And that leads to open doors to the occult. I want to leave it open at the end for how we can engage this, but I will say that there's some recommendations we have at the back. If people have a fascination with or an obsession about UFO phenomena, or you think they have an open door to the occult, we give some recommendations. And again, this is largely from Hugh's experience because not only was an astronomer who had a lot of experience with it, but he also was a pastor at church, an apologetics ministry for a long time, and he would go on and interview people and find that these kinds of things can close the doors to the occult. We asked them to look for signs. Do they have occultic behavior? Or do they have occultic phenomena in their homes? Did they participate in seances or tarot cards or Ouija boards or things like that? I had a friend who's a believer now. She experienced a levitation thing that scared her to death. And this was before she became a Christian. find those things. And even Christians who may not have any personal open door to the occult can still experience this phenomenon if, for example, they buy a home in which occultic phenomena somehow still is in that home. Repent of those open doors to the occult, admitting to God it was wrong, confessing the sin of following the occult, demonstrate repentance by ridding self of occult phenomena, physically getting rid of it, like we saw in the Old Testament about having to tear down the idols. Turn one's life over to Jesus Christ, acknowledge that his will is supreme, and then dedicate yourself to following his good purposes. Again, these things are in the book. I don't want to belabor it, but this is kind of the data that we have found. I want to save time. There's much we can discuss. I would just say that if it's the physics aspects of things, I have a PhD in political science, which is by definition not real science, not physical science. So I can answer a lot of the questions that Ken addressed. I can answer certainly a lot of the questions I addressed. I can answer a lot more questions about the DNI report and some of my own kind of speculation of what this could be. But I would ask that if it's a technical, scientific, or physical question, if I don't know it right off the hand, I will refer you to Hugh Ross to answer that. Okay, let me turn it over, stop sharing my screen, and